And I hope you can see the slide. It says field safety and flight protocols. Everybody see that?
Yeah,
I
good.
lost it. Huh? Can you guys?
Yeah, we can see it. Yep, we can see it and hear it.
Okay, sounds good. Here we go. So let me just get right into this thing. This is going to walk us through, if you're a brand new member, you know, what you can encounter when you're at the field and so forth, and all kinds of stuff like that. Most of these we're going to go across very quickly. Entering and exiting the field. Hopefully by now everybody's got their gate keys that you've been assigned, and should get you into the field, you know, just about any time that you want. And as everybody knows, everybody should be wearing their name badges, you know, whenever you're at the field for recognition, safety purposes. That way we also know that you've got your AMA registration.
Sorry to interrupt you, Steve. I'm really sorry. Somebody has like a blender in the background that we're hearing. I don't know if you guys are hearing it. It sounds like it's somebody. Can you hear it?
I don't hear it.
Oh, sorry, then it must be me. There is a noise in the background. I apologize.
Caesar, I think that you're just at your house making margaritas for everybody. Is that what it is? Okay. And then I think everybody's aware that we allow everybody access to the field 24/7. So that's good news. Something that is a little bit of a pet peeve for me is for the people that come into the field, particularly when the roads are dry, is that, you know, you come ripping up the road and then there's a big cloud of dust that follows you. And if you leave your windows open or the hatch in your car for your hatchbacks and things like that, we got dust all over the place. So the other thing I ask is, if you would, you know, kind of go slow down the roads and, you know, be careful when you're backing in and things like that to not stir up too much dust. Fortunately, this year we haven't had a great deal of rain, and the work that I did the last couple of years to try to get the roads in better shape, they've held up pretty well. But if you guys ever see a situation that's out there, our good friend Hal has been really good about maintaining the field, and we've got that new tractor now that was donated by Ron Roberts. And, you know, thank you for all the work that you've done, Hal. You should be commended for that. So the pit area, I think everybody knows that you just have to be a little bit careful with the flammable items, clean up behind yourself and so forth. On the windy days that are out there, I've seen, especially this year, a lot of the planes blow right off the table. So make sure that they're secured. We used to have some Velcro tie downs out there, and I'm thinking about maybe it's time that we put up some more out there. And all you do is you wrap them around the landing gear, and then there's two little Velcro tabs that tie down to the carpeted tabletops. They work out really well. Sometimes in the last couple of years, I've gotten some complaints from some of the members that some of the members think that they have their names assigned to a specific table and stuff like that. You can grab any table that you want out there and enjoy it and try some different ones. There tends to be people that tend to go to the same locations all the time, but you can have any table that you want to enjoy it out there.
I know the only people that really had issue with that are Jason Lukakis and Mike Loneker, and they're just because they're shorter. Obviously, if you guys see people with wheelchairs, let them have the lower tables if you would, please. It makes it easier for them. We appreciate it.
Yeah. For those of you who have the either larger nitro gas or electric planes out there, we have 3 ways to be able to restrain them for when you're setting up, warming up your engines, or just doing some pre-flight type of things out there. Everybody's familiar with the nitro tables that have got the restraints on it. The pictures of the Sullivan tail anchors. If you haven't done so already, please turn off your audios on the deal. And then a lot of the guys still like to use the rope restraints out there. If you ever need help with how to operate, you know, these things, or if you need help warming up your plane or what have you, there's a number of guys out there who'd be happy to help you. All right. Battery charging station. For those of you guys that sat in on the battery setup 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whenever we did it, you're going to be familiar with this. I just want to cover it again because there was a couple of issues that came up this week. And I asked Steve Karen for information on this. Steve, Karen, and Joe Villarreal were the guys that actually built this charging station out there. And I just want to go over some things. in terms of the proper way to use that. And we're going to do this real quick. But bottom line on the thing is that we do lock up the charging station every night. If you happen to be the last person at the field, whether you use the charging station yourself or not, please be sure to lock up the cabinet on that so we don't have it vandalized by somebody or some coyote decides to get a charge out of life, you know, type of a thing. And if you need to gain access to that, it's available to any club member, and the combination lock for the charging station is on the back of your badge. Currently it's, I think, 1946, but I could stand to be corrected on that. But the biggest issue out there is the use of the proper charging rates that are on the unit. And basically this charging station was designed for multiple people to use it at the same time, but it doesn't have infinite capacity. So the two things that we have to watch out for, you'll see a picture on the next screen, I think, or let me just come back to the other one. The 2 meters that you see dead center in the picture there above where the 12-volt terminals are indicate the amount of charge that's going into the system, the amount of charge that's coming out of it, and then the status of the batteries out there. And you'll see, you can't read them in this picture, but there's a reminder on there that will tell you that you shouldn't use the charger if it falls below, I think it's 12.3 volts, if I remember right on the thing. We very, very rarely have had that fall down because we do have some good heavy duty batteries in there that are kept charged by the sun. But you know, take a glance at that, particularly on rainy days or really cloudy days. All right. Finally, or coming back into this thing, make sure that you do watch out for those maximum charge rates. The next slide will get into that a little bit. The batteries, if you guys are flying some of the bigger batteries like the 6S batteries and stuff like that, if you're trying to charge them up at the field, it's going to take you hours to do that. The 6S's should be charged at home, or bring your own generator, or charge them off of your car battery. But the system was really set up for just topping off batteries or charging 3-cell, 2-cell batteries type of stuff like that. The 6L's just not designed for it at this point. So the key on this is you're going to see this is just a photograph of the card that's laying in the charge station out there. And the thing to draw your attention to is, depending on the number of cells that are in the battery, up here, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but you know, 2-cell, they're all 4 amps up to that point. And then the 4 cells, you know, the maximum charge rate against the thing is, you know, drops down dramatically. So if you're like most of us that are flying the 6S batteries, you know, they're 4,000, 5,000 milliamp hours. And if you're charging them properly, and if it's this 5 amp battery, 5,000 milliamp hour or 5 amp battery, it's going to take you 2.5 hours to charge that thing. Okay. If you try to push it at the higher rate, you will blow the fuse, and you'll take down the current capability of the batteries in there for everybody else. So currently we have 10 amp fuses on the thing. And for those of you that know how to figure out watts and amps and all that kind of stuff, you know, you can figure out the power ratings and so forth. With a 10 amp fuse on there, if you're charging an individual battery, you can kind of figure out how much you can charge on it. If you need help with that, tonight's not to be a technical class, but the point of this is that you just don't want to overuse that charger, because you will blow it up at some point. Any questions on this? Okay.
I have a statement, not a question.
Fire away.
There are 10 amp fuses right below in kind of like the little tray section, but I went out and bought 50 additional 10 amp fuses, and they're inside the shed right there. Okay. In that cabinet, just as you go into the shed on the left, on the top shelf. So there is a big package of fuses if needed. But right now there's a small package, and it has a couple in there just in case, and we can restock that as needed.
All right, sounds good. We originally, when we designed the facility out there, it was designed for 5 amp fuses, but we found that, you know, if people don't abuse the thing, going to 10 is okay. But if you're blowing a fuse out there, it means that you've abused the system. It's as simple as that. So the other thing is having to do with the damaged batteries that are out there. Anybody ever seen a puff battery like that?
Once
If
or
you
twice,
have-
unfortunately.
If you haven't, you will someday, probably. A crash or short circuit, or just overcharging the battery or draining the batteries beyond their 3.3 volt limits on it will cause the battery to puff out like that and frequently cause it to burst into flames. So you want to be careful with that. If the proper protocol for the field is to very safely try to take your batteries home. If a battery gets to this condition, quite frankly, I wouldn't put it in my car, type of thing. So last year or 2 years ago, I think it was, you'll see it out there right underneath the charging station. It's one of those Home Depot buckets that's filled with salt water. And it's safe to go ahead and dump the batteries inside of there. And over about a week, they'll effectively discharge themselves down to 0 volts. And then it's okay to throw them away. Probably the better, more ecologically, environmentally conscious way to do that is to take the batteries after they have been discharged to either Home Depot or Lowe's. Each of them have a battery disposal station there. Typically, they were designed for using with some of the power tools, for the electric drills and things like that. But they're happy to take the batteries there. And the Home Depot that was closest to my house, it was very close to where the return desk was. If you have to bring something back to the store, it's just hanging on the wall there, and it's a great big unit. You can just dump them in there. You don't have to ask anybody, just go in and pop them in. So any questions on this? Okay.
Again, it's me, Hal.
Yep.
If you would cut the wires off before you take them in, as an ex-Home Depot employee that was in charge of that area, it makes it a lot easier for the girls up front.
Good advice. All right, let's talk a little bit about the flight line stuff. Currently, the way that it's been during the COVID situation, we originally had it when COVID was in heavy rampant growth mode type of a thing. We dropped down from the 5 pilots at the same time that we had to 3. Currently published, at least, it's no more than 4 pilots on the line at the same time. But with the easing of the COVID stuff and the mask wearing and things like that, we'll probably go back up. It's up to the board to announce whether they want to go back up to the 5 pilots on the station, and go from there. I have the slide up there about warming up and tuning. For the guys that are working with the nitro or the gas planes, you want to try to do the warm-ups inside the green fence there and not step out onto the tarmac, if you will, that's leading out to the runway. And again, for those of you that aren't big into the fuel type planes like the gas or the nitro, ask for help if you ever get into that situation out there. All right. What does it say? Hitchcock Military Academy. Yeah, that would be Timmy. Probably the most dangerous situation in terms of flying at the field is for people that haven't heard the call outs for takeoff, landing, low pass, and things like that. So I just want to kind of get into that. It's very appropriate to call coming out when you're starting to roll from inside the fence out to the flight line out there, is the proper way to do it. The next one is when you're preparing to take off. And it's very important that you look around and clear the air before you decide to go out and take off. We had a horrendous collision about 2 years ago with a very senior member inside the group, and another guy that also was very experienced. And he had indicated that he was going to do a low pass over the field or over the runway, and clearly called it out. The guy that was going to take off somehow didn't hear it, because I think he was partially hard of hearing, and he took off right in the path of this beautiful biplane that was out there, and it destroyed both planes. And there was probably a couple $1,000s worth of damage by the time all was said and done. And there was some very hard feelings that came out of the thing. And one of the members, because it was the second time that this guy didn't observe that there was a plane in the air right in the flight path, we had to suspend him for a little while. It was very ugly situation. So what I'm suggesting to you is that just check the area. If you see somebody that's flying by or at a different rate of speed than you're anticipating taking off and stuff like that, make sure that you check with the other guys on the flight line that are planning to be in the area. It's really important to fulfill the pattern. If you're by yourself out in the field and there's nobody else flying, you can fly anywhere you want, okay? But we do have a described right-hand pattern at the field so that everybody's at least flying in the same rotation. I routinely, and I probably, if I'm an offender on this myself, routinely see guys that are flying in the opposite direction of the pattern on the field. And that's an accident waiting to happen. And we'll get more into what the pattern is and takeoff and landing patterns are in just a minute. The boundaries are pretty clearly defined, and I don't have a slide here to really indicate it, but most of you have seen the orange flags that are kind of in the, what would that be? The northwest corner of the field out there. There are 3 or 4 big bright orange flags that are out there. The reason that they're out there is just beyond those flags is down the hill is the freeway. And you want to make sure that you don't, get over the freeway. We will not allow you to fly over the freeway. If ever we lose control of the plane, it crashes out there, potentially could kill somebody. And, that'd be the end of our flying activities for sure. So watch out for that. And we'll talk more about the boundaries in just a little bit. The other thing that you want to call out is the low passes. Frequently, it's fun to come down close to the field and so forth. But it's very important that you stay to the far side or the north side of the runway or into the grass area when you're making those low passes. If you come right down the center line, especially if there's other pilots out there, if something goes wrong with that plane, it can cause a real problem. Chris Avellino, you want to comment on that anyway?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it. I mean, just know when to, if you're running solo, okay, and you're practicing, check. But if the line, it's like anything. If there's 3 or 4 pilots on there, recognizing you're having fun, but make sure safety stays at the top of the list, right?
And it's not unusual for some of the 3D guys to try to come down the center line, in a knife edge pass and things like that. And they're fun to watch. And those guys pretty much, have got their act together. But if you're learning how to fly, it's not the place to do that.
I think it's just back to your point, Gab. I think it's just about communicating.
It really is.
And just saying, coming down the line.
Yeah. You want to call out the touch and goes. And if there's a lot of guys flying, on any single time that there's multiple pilots in the air, you want to minimize your touch and goes because sometimes it's hard, especially if a guy gets into trouble. He's running out of power, running out of battery, running out of fuel and stuff like that. They got to come down pretty quick. And one of the things that I try to avoid like crazy, I love to do the touch and goes myself, but if there's glider traffic out those days, those guys, are at the whim of the weather. And if they've got to come in quick to land and stuff, and you're in the middle of doing a touch and go, it can cause a real problem out there. Landing, we're going to get into some of the landing call outs in just a minute, but you definitely want to call that out. And then occasionally guys want to practice a landing or fly over the field in the opposite direction of the normal pattern type flight. And it's okay to do that, especially if you're out there by yourself or you got one other guy that you trust that you've flown in before and you want to come down and make a pass in the opposite direction. Just make sure that you're communicating, as Chris said. That's the whole key to the whole thing here. So the thing is that sometimes I'll hear somebody I'm standing right next to out there say very quietly, I'm going to do a touch and go. And I know that the guys on the other end of the flight line can't hear that. So what you want to do, and we also have some members that are getting up in age and having some challenges hearing, just because of getting a little hard of hearing in their lives. Make sure you shout it out. And one of the things that I like to do myself is when I hear, somebody call out that they're going to do a touch and go, or they're going to do a low pass, or they're going to land, whatever it happens to be, I try to acknowledge that and say, gotcha. Just let the other person know that you're there. And if you observe somebody coming in and the other pilots haven't observed the fact that they made a call out for a touch and go or a landing or low pass or whatever it happens to be, you tell them that, hey, I think the guy's coming in now. One of the things that Chris does extremely well is that he frequently, for a new pilot or if there's somebody practicing, he'll stand on the line and provide some clearance. He's almost like the traffic control tower out there. And I got to tell you, Chris, I really appreciate it when you do that. And I'm sure that the rest of the guys do too.
We appreciate that, Chris.
No problem.
All right. So the other thing to think about is just getting ready, and it's really easy to get lax on these types of things. And we had a situation, a veteran pilot this past weekend. Chris, I think you were out there. I'm not going to mention any names. I think you know what I'm talking about. Guy was starting up a gas plane, experienced pilot, flown the plane before and stuff. And he started up the plane and the motor went up to full speed and he couldn't shut it down. I mean, it was just wailing away out there. What did he forget to do? He forgot to assign the proper model on his transmitter. And, you know, there was no control to the receiver to do a, you know, shut down or adjust the throttle speed or what have you. And it was pretty scary. You know, he picked up the plane and somebody reached over and finally, I think, switched it off or choked the fuel line to be able to shut it off. But that could have been disaster because the plane could have, you know, basically taken off by itself.
And the good thing was he had somebody holding the plane too and
Yeah.
spotting the plane as well.
Yeah, exactly. So the key on this thing is make sure before you do anything, check your transmitter, make sure your batteries are charged on your transmitter, choose the proper model, and make sure your switches are in the proper place. I have on some of the models that I've got, I have some interesting mixes on it. And with the ability to program some of the voice commands and voice checks that you have on the thing, so that I don't forget, when I first turn on that new model, it goes through and it says, don't forget to put the flaps up. Don't forget to put the gear down, you know, and things like that. It's just a nice safety check before you even, you know, turn on your receiver in your airplane out there. And I think everybody knows out there, I hope that you do, is the proper way to get going on things is you turn on your transmitter first, then the aircraft receiver. And the reverse is true on the way in, is when you get done flying, you should turn off your aircraft first by, you know, disconnecting the battery, or some of the planes have got a switch on it, then turn off your transmitter, because as long as there's a handshake between the transmitter and the receiver out there, the likelihood of a flyaway or some bizarre thing, you know, is not going to make some sense. I don't.
Go ahead. I was just saying, can I add to that real quick?
Please do.
So I cannot tell you how many times I've seen planes go flying through the pits because people are not following this process. And like this one slide could really save fingers, arms. I had a good friend who went to the hospital with a cut all the way down to the bone because he didn't follow the proper procedure on this one. And then probably about a month or so ago, a good friend of mine was out at the field standing over his plane, thank goodness, and turned the transmitter off on a 85-inch airplane, and it was electric, and the propeller went full throttle.
Yeah.
So you cannot forget this procedure, especially if you're new. So it's exactly what Geb said. Transmitter on, plug in the battery. When you're done, battery comes off, transmitter goes off. It's just you have to do it in reverse. It's a key piece.
Yeah. I have to admit, the next one I've made a mistake on before. I thought I had a full battery. I thought I had charged it at home. I actually inadvertently picked up a battery that had not been charged, put it in the airplane, took off, and had no power, and had to come in a dead stick landing out there. So the first thing that I have two things that I do for myself out there is before I install any battery inside the airplane, first thing I do is I put the meter on it to make sure that it's pretty close to full. You know, if you've had the battery stored for a couple hours or a day or two, you're going to lose a little bit of power on the thing. Most batteries charge to, 4.2 volts per cell out there. You know, if they get down below 415, 4.15 or so, I think about topping them back up a little bit, just to make sure I've got a full tank. But the planes will fly fine, on 415, for extended period of time. But just get into that. And then I've also seen guys that have forgotten to put their gasoline or nitro fuel into the fuel tank on those kind of planes. They take off and the motor sputters out, and it's just that they forgot, it's a brain fart. What I do for the batteries, I know most of us now are flying, battery powered planes. Good 80% of the club is on batteries now. Is what I do is I carry my batteries out in a fireproof container. It's either one of those flexible bag type of things or one of the ammo cans type of thing. And all my full ones are in there. And as I use them through the day, I just leave the batteries on the table that I've gone through so that there's no doubt which is a good one and a dead one, you know, type of a thing. On the new models, I've seen guys that go out there and they think that they pre-flighted the plane because they hook up their battery and they're wiggling their sticks and they see the control surfaces move, but they don't look to see which direction that they're turning. So what I typically do is I run through just a little same procedure every time on every plane, just so that if I push the aileron stick to the right, I expect to see the right aileron pop up and the left one go down, and just the reverse on the left, and pull back on the stick. The horizontal stabilizer and the elevator should go up. And if you're doing the rudder, it's the same thing. If you're pushing the rudder stick to the right, the rudder should go to the right as you're oriented towards facing from the back of the plane looking forward. So a lot of guys also, for a safety procedure, especially if you've got an expensive plane, is to go out there and perform a range check before each and every flight. And I strongly recommend this because things can go wrong on planes. And you know, we've had a couple of guys go out there and have some frame drops and brownouts, you know, on the receivers and wonder what's going on. And we find out that what's happened is that the antennas have leaned up against a metal component or a carbon fiber component on the aircraft itself, that it dramatically limits the amount of range that the receiver can respond to the transmitter. So, you know, it's a 2-minute job really to walk, you know, 100 feet away, 50 feet away, put your transmitter into a low power situation and see if you know, you can move the sticks in the proper way. When we talk about the transmitters and receivers in the next class that we're going to do, we're going to work more on that. And we're also going to show you how to put the receivers in what's called fail-safe mode, which allows the plane to choose a particular attitude of flight, even if it loses signal with the transmitter. And on my planes, what I do is I reduce the power by about 50%, and I start have it make a very gentle right-hand turn. That way I can, if the plane is flying away from me, it'll come back to the field and hopefully regain connection to the transmitter out there without having the plane go crazy and pitch into the jungle or something like that. So we'll get more into that, and I strongly recommend that you sit in on that class to learn how to set that up for fail-safe. It'll save your airplanes and potentially can save somebody's life, you know, if it's getting into a hazardous situation. Okay, questions on any of this stuff, guys? Okay.
Only one other quick comment, Steve. Talking about doing pre-checks, make sure you also have a working throttle cut on your planes.
Yes.
That's really the only other thing I'd add there.
Absolutely. And anybody not familiar how to set up a throttle cut on your plane? Okay. If you have questions on that, see anybody at the field, they can all show you how to do it. And the transmitter class that we're going to do in a couple of weeks, we'll cover that as well. All right.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
As far as the throttle cut, the other thing that I tell people is to always set up on the same switch on every plane so that they don't ever know which one it isn't. And just, I tell them, I don't care which stick it is. I usually pick the far rear one on the right.
Yeah.
But that's for me. But then they always know. And I think I tell them to treat that throttle cut switch like it's a hand grenade pin.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. I like it. All right, good. So just a few things about getting ready for takeoff out there. It's what you should do when you're approaching the line in terms of staging prior to the flight. And this is when you want to do those pre-flight checks, you know, in terms of the control surfaces on the airplane and doing what you want it to do. What you want to do is check the flight envelope. And what I mean by that is that you're going to scan the sky to see who else is up in the air. And, you know, if you got a mix of guys, you got a park flyer size plane in the air, you got a sailplane in the air, you got somebody flying 3D, and you got one of the Speed Demon planes that are out there breaking 200. I'm sitting that one out. You know, there's just too much traffic in the air, and there's plenty of time to get up there when it's a little bit less traffic. We have a couple of guys out there, without mentioning names, that like to fly warplanes that are scale planes, and they're taking up the whole friggin' sky because that's the way that they like to fly out there. And personally, when this one individual who's a great pilot is out there, I'll sit it out until I know that he's on the ground, because I don't want to interfere with him, and I don't have to worry about that some guy's not flying the exact pattern like I like to fly it, and do that. So check the airspace before you do anything. And this goes hand in hand with it. Make sure that you're checking with the other pilots for entry, and ask them. You know, some of the guys out there, we had a situation pop up a couple of weeks ago that we had a guy, an experienced pilot, that was wanting to maiden a brand new plane out there. And the guy was pretty annoyed because there was a guy out there that was buzzing around, and he wanted the whole sky, you know, to practice and make sure that his brand new airplane was going to perform as it should. And, you know, my feeling is if somebody's going to go through the trouble of going out there and doing a maiden, if you see somebody step up to the line while you're flying, just politely ask them, hey, I'm doing a maiden flight. You know, I'd like to have the sky to myself for this flight. And if somebody tells you no to that, boy, I'll tell you what, they don't belong in this club, you know, kind of a thing. It's just all about the courtesy. All right. And then, you know, as we've been through on this thing before, you want to announce the coming outs and takeoffs and the landings and all that stuff. And I'm a big fan of just saying, I heard you. Okay, I got it. You know, something like that to let the guy know that you heard him. All right. I put this slide in there specifically for Armstrong. That's a Clues Photoshop job, but I thought you guys would get a kick out of it. At any rate. Nitro and gas sound levels out there, guys are pretty good about it. If you see somebody that's flying a plane that you think is too loud, the club has a decibel meter that's in the shed. I have one on my phone that I've used before. A lot of the times the guys will come up to me and say, hey, I got a brand new plane today. Would you check me, you know, in terms of the sound level that's out there? It's very rare that our neighbors have complained about issues in the past. But it's on the days that the Santa Ana winds are blowing, when it's a reverse of the typical pattern where the winds are blowing more from the east than from the west. With some of the guys that are flying the big nitro gas planes out there, the wind will blow that sound. And there's this one neighbor that we've got on the opposite side of the freeway out there that when I was club president, the guy would call in just you could count on it like clockwork. Every time the Santa Ana winds would come, this guy would call the county and complain, and then the county would call me and say, hey, you got to turn down the noise. And all we did was wait for the wind to change and everything was okay again. But for those of you that do like to fly the bigger nitros or gas planes, make sure you got them muffled properly. And, you know, we've got some conditions for flying after 8 and some for flying after 9. It's clearly posted on the board out there. If you have questions, you know, just ask. All right. Chris, anything on that?
Nope, nothing.
Okay. All right, so taking off. I should have put a picture of this out there, but you know what I'm talking about. It's the north-south running white line that's just maybe 50 feet to the west of the pits. You shouldn't take off before you clear that line. Why? Come on, old timers, you know the answer to this.
Safety, so you don't fly into the people standing there at the flight line.
Exactly. You get the plane that goes errant on you, you know, torque of the airplane makes it pitch to the left or something like that, doesn't fly into the crowd. It's as simple as that. That's why that white line is there. Okay. We talked about the field boundaries out there, the orange flag. You definitely don't want to fly over the pits. If you can avoid flying low over the jungle, you want to do that. And absolutely no way should you be flying over the freeway. Despite all these warnings and going over it at all the club meetings, and it's in the bylaws and the rules and stuff like that, occasionally we get somebody calling in out, you know, that's heading down the freeway and they say that they think there's a plane landing out there. I think mostly it's depth perception that they think it's a real size full scale airplane that's coming to land. But just don't fly over the freeway. If something happens out there, it's going to be a disaster.
One thing I'll throw in with that, for those of you who are learning to fly, when you get out there towards the far end of the west end of the west end of the runway, you might want to bank early because we do have some power lines that are hanging out there over the field, and you don't want to hit those lines at all with your plane. That could be real bad.
Some of you may not be aware that Chris Thompson and I were out in our trailers, campers and stuff. What was it? Was it a week ago or 2 weeks ago now? And we were just out there, just nobody else was flying. Nobody was at the field except for Chris and I that afternoon. We were just sitting enjoying each other's company. And suddenly the wind had come up and it caused the power lines that Doug was mentioning here to actually strike each other and caused a short circuit, and the lines fell to the ground out there, and it looked like a fireworks show that was out there, and it set the grass on fire. And it was, Chris and I grabbed our fire extinguishers out of our RVs and ran out there. By the time we get out there, it was clear that there was no way that we were going to be able to put the fire out. So Chris called 911 while I ran up to open up the gate. And before you knew it, the sheriffs were there, and then the fire department was out there, and they successfully put out the fire. But it actually kept reigniting because the lines were down and they were blowing around, and every time that they moved, they would spark again and cause the grass to catch fire out there. And there's kind of a funny, stupid side story that came out of this thing. As I'm running down to the gate, I see a thing that I think is a fire truck coming in down the road. I went, wow, the guy got here fast. He must have used the pass key that we have to get the fire department and police into the field out there. So I jumped up on the guy's floorboards on the side of the cab on this truck, and I pointed him to where the fire was. And he says, okay. So he took me down there, and then I realized it was the pumper truck for the porta potty guy. So he says, what do you want me to do? Pump poop on this thing? And I said, well, if that's what it takes, sure. 2 minutes later, the fire trucks were there, and they had the thing contained. And then it took all afternoon and evening for the SDG&E guys to replace those lines. And fortunately, there was no serious damage other than, a little grass fire out there.
Hey, Gab, can I have one small thing?
Sure.
I would highly recommend, whether you're seasoned or new, take a walk and go see where those power lines are. You physically have to walk down there and just look. I think for nothing else, when the subconscious kicks in and you're taking off, you'll maintain a little bit more discipline, and when you realize how close those power lines are to the departure end of the runway.
Yeah, and let me add to that, Chris, for something else I know that we're both passionate about, is for the guys that have the larger planes out there, sometimes it's difficult to judge where those orange flags are. And Chris and I and Mike Elrod and somebody else did the same thing too, is one of us actually walked down to the fence adjacent to the freeway out there, which is just barely beyond where the flag line is out there. And we were talking between our cell phones so that it can help somebody judge exactly what the distance to the freeway is. And it's quite surprising, how close that can come up out there. So at any rate.
Yeah. Hey, Don, I do think you should, if you're not already doing it, anytime you have the student training, take everybody for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
And start off on the right foot for any class going forward.
It's a really good idea.
That's a great idea.
Something else, if I could add something right here. I've heard other guys on the flight line kind of stand by, and if they see another pilot that's getting out there, a lot of times the pilot, like you said, won't realize how close he is. And you might want to mention to the pilot that it's time to turn and get away from there.
I completely agree, Rick. Thank you. So this is getting ready for landing type of a situation, just a chart that, everybody's probably pretty familiar with, but it's good to use the proper terminology as you're getting into things. And Chris actually gave me a good idea. In fact, I'll ask you to comment on this after I get through this little thing, is that the proper terminology is to use the crosswind leg, the downwind leg, the base leg, and the final. And my recommendation is that you go out there and you should announce your intention to land. For me, it's usually in the downwind leg, or I'm just turning out a crosswind. I'll let people know, or I'll ask them, it's my intention to land. How you doing on battery power or gas power for yourself? I need to come down within a minute or so. How you guys set up? And sometimes guys didn't realize how much battery power fuel that they had left in there. And they go, oh, geez, I've only got 15 seconds. They didn't hear their timer on their transmitter. Or they didn't glance down to see what the countdown timer was. And I'll give them right away if I've got a minute. I know that I can make a full lap around the field in about 30 seconds. So, that's that kind of a thing. But it's important to call these things out. You say that usually I start making it real clear what my intent is when I start making the turn into base. I'm on base. And then when I turn to final and I'm on final approach, I'll let people know that I'm coming in out there. That way there's no doubt that I'm coming in. And if somebody says, can I wave you off? I've got dead stick, or geez, I just ran out of fuel, or I'm lower than I thought. Great. I can find a different place to land, on the field. The other thing is that I know that Chris does this routinely out there, and I try to do it too, is I'll tell you, if I'm getting in at where we've got a conflict that there's two guys that are trying to land at about the same time, I'll ask somebody, go down and roll down to the end of the runway at the west end down there and hold, and I'll do a short approach landing on the thing. And that works out real well, and it avoids conflict and hits that are out there. Chris, you mentioned something to me yesterday about the square turns. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I just think it's I think if you go through the flight training, or if you're looking at the flight training or the manual, sometimes if you round out, so in this depiction right here, you see the downwind and the base leg, those are typically 90-degree turns. And a lot of people will try to round out the turn to the approach. Rounding out the turn causes other problems. For example, and I'd have to show you at the field. So if you see me, or if I see you flying, I can always help. But if you round out from that base to final and you sort of cut that corner, you're potentially going to come in too high, too low, too inside. And then you're changing the dynamic of the altitude the plane is flying at and the speed in which it's flying at. And so if you actually just maintain the 90 degrees, and it's a little weird when you're looking to the right and you're on that base leg and the plane is sort of flying kind of away from you, but you're setting yourself up. So when you get on that final approach, there should be no anxiety, if you will, on that final approach. You should have enough time that you can see sort of the glide slope and what's happening. And so that way the plane's wings are level as it's coming into land. When you're making that sort of rounding turn, the plane's wings are dipping. So you're pushing the nose down, and you're just adding more stuff to your brain while you're already trying to think about landing. So if you can think about trying to square those things out, you give yourself an extra moment to just kind of catch your breath, calm down, get focused, get those wings level, and level wings create better landings.
Yep, that's for sure.
It's a good thing to remember that for the most part, every glider landing is a dead stick.
Yep.
So, we can modify and go out into the grass, but I've had occasions where guys have passed me up in the final approach with a power plane.
Yeah.
And I had already called out glider landing, and I wasn't one of the ones that I have that has a motor. So that's something to impress upon.
Yep. And
Okay.
that last slide really indicates this: the sailplanes and anybody that's in a low fuel situation, does have the right of way out there.
Hey, Gab, one other thing, I know you're trying to probably a little press for time too, but if you're on the flight line and somebody's coming in for a landing, you're perfectly okay to let that pilot know, hey, runway's clear, wind's coming out of the southwest, wind's calm, blah, blah, blah. You can always just throw out a quick shout out. Even if you're new, like those are very safe things to help somebody else out. Because again, there's a lot going on in the brain trying to land. And so you're so focused. Sometimes you'll see people who almost have like this, like they're about to catch a ball and really stiff and like anxious. Anything you can do to help add maybe a little context, just one quick blurb. Winds are calm, winds are out of the southwest. That'll help that pilot a little bit.
Absolutely. The next slide here may also get into that. Chris and I talked about this yesterday, and it's a little tool that I use when I'm trying to train the pilots out there, is that a lot of people have an issue about either making their base leg or their final way too much elevation, either too high or too low. And what I try to do is tell people as they're flying on the downwind leg and they make the turn in the base, the airplane should be equal in elevation from the ground perspective as you're looking from the flight line out there, that their wings should be approximately on the tops of these hills here. I don't know if you can see my pointer as I'm doing this, but if they come in on that kind of an approach where the plane is about right about here, they're going to make a good approach to the runway. If they're way up here or way down here, they're probably not going to hit it, or they're going to be struggling and be nervous about, having to descend too fast, or that they might crash into the big trees that are out there over the jungle and stuff like that. And I know that a lot of people will point out, it's lousy, you can't really see it on this slide, but that road that's on about a 45-degree angle, that's right there. Whenever I'm doing an orientation for new pilots at the field, I actually walk them out on the runway so that they can see that road is actually dead center on the runway. From the pits, it doesn't look like it, but it actually is right in the center of the runway. So watch for that.
Steve, unfortunately, we're not seeing your pointer. So,
Okay. All right. Well, you get the idea of what I'm trying to say here. So, what you want to do is you want to start making those announcements like we talked about on either the crosswind or downwind leg is the way I suggested. Follow those mountaintop ridges on the base for the proper elevation, like I just went over, and then align that angle road for the final approach. Work on that. You'll see what I mean if you get out there, and you'll see that most people are just doing it naturally. They're coming in at that height, but the new pilots tend to have a hard time with that. So we can help them with that. So some other things, let's get into some fun stuff out here, is that if you're new to the field, some of the things that you can do is the field is open to members for 24/7 type of thing. If you decide to take your camper or trailers out there and want to spend the night, feel free to do so. Just keep it clean and neat. We do set up and impose a 72-hour limit for camping out at the field unless there's some sort of event that's going to go on for a few days. For example, in June, we've got the Heli Fun Fly, and guys will be coming out Thursday or some even earlier than that, and then staying through Sunday. So, that's okay as long as we have a thing. There's a tendency, especially for water, and the thing, if you want to lighten the load on your RV or trailer or stuff like that, to not the holding tank, not the gray water or the black water, but to dump just the fresh water, you shouldn't do it because it'll rut the field and stuff. And go out there. All right, other things that you're eligible for, and I know a lot of you are taking advantage of this thing, is Palomar dollars. And we don't advertise this enough, and we probably should. But there are times that we need some work crews for different types of things out at the field. A lot of you have helped build the tables or put up the shade cover out there or move the gravel around or lay in runways and stuff like that. If you're doing the work out there, we'd be happy to give you some credit for the time that you spent. Just make sure that whoever organized the event gets your name and the amount of time that you spent out there. And, we'll give you some Palomar dollars towards the credit of the full price memberships next year. Unfortunately, for the senior memberships that are, heavily discounted to begin with, we just want slave labor from you. We're not going to give you any Palomar dollars. Okay. Gallagher, I'm so sorry, man. I'll tell you what, man, you should have 10,000 Palomar dollars. So check that out. A couple of other things is if there are problems, crashes, accidents, fires, whatever you have to do is make sure that you check with one of the either the board members or officers of the club, but more importantly is to check in with our safety officer, who is currently Jim Christie, and just inform him of what happened in case there are repercussions downstream or if a claim has to be filed with the AMA. It's important that you let Jim Christie know what happened, because he's responsible for creating the reports if it gets to that. Probably the biggest thing to watch out for is if you do have a fire, either it's a fuel fire or a battery fire and stuff like that, everybody should be aware of where the fire extinguishers are, right at the first chain link fence closest to the tables and pits area out there. There are 3 water-filled fire extinguishers out there that we do keep an eye on to make sure that they're full. Just grab one of those. If you see your plane go down, grab one whether you think it's going to fly or catch on fire or not. Just haul it out with you and go from there. I keep a small chemical fire extinguisher in the back of my Honda. And if I'm flying a new plane that I'm not sure about, I usually carry it out to the field with me. And I know that a lot of the nitro flyers and the gasoline flyers that are out there, they put a fire extinguisher right where they're starting their plane up in case there is an incident. And that's really a good thing to do. So go ahead.
I got a question kind of going hand in hand with this and the camping.
Yeah.
Speaking of fires out there, are we, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but are we allowed to have any open pit fires out there for camping?
we've limited to the propane fire pits out there.
Okay.
No natural wood fires because they can spark and cause a fire.
That's what
But-
I figured. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And good point. I should have brought that up. It's something to watch out for. Most of the campgrounds around out in the place, all these RV parks too, are going to that same thing. It's very difficult to find firewood anymore, in these places. So the number one thing to do is if the plane has not caught fire, and you're not in any imminent danger out there, make sure you disconnect the battery in your aircraft out there, because if you've compressed the battery, bent the battery, crushed the battery somehow because of a crash landing, there's a potential that could be caught on fire. So just pull that out. All right, some things just about club visitors and guests and things like that. I think this is all just common sense, but any guest should stay behind the chain link fence in the pit area. If you want to invite one of your buddies to stand up on the flight line with you, that's fine, but you just need to supervise them. The kids that do come out there, man, you got to keep them in the table pit area out there. Don't let them come forward to that, because there's an attraction to run out there and see the planes coming in and landing. I've caught a couple kids and grabbed them by a belt loop to make sure they don't run out onto the runway, when somebody's taking off or coming in. We have the AMA does allow for non-AMA pilots or non-club members to fly a buddy box situation, as long as they have an AMA pilot in charge of the buddy box. Okay. And that's why we can teach flight training on Monday nights with non-AMA and non-club member pilots out there. It's an exception that the AMA makes for the betterment of the hobby out there. And the last thing is that, we do get a lot of visitors out on the field, especially on the weekends. And if you see somebody that's out there and looking all glassy eyed about what's going on, go up there and say hello, tell them about the hobby. They appreciate it. And you have some fun telling them about the stuff that got you excited about it too. So let's invite some people, to come and enjoy themselves. So just some housekeeping stuff, if you will. Most of you, I think, are aware that the dumpster and the porta potty are serviced each week, usually on Mondays. And they do a good job with that. If you do have large trash, you crash a plane, you have a carton or a box or something like that, don't just put it in the trash can, walk it out to the dumpster, if you will. If you see a trash can is full, take the minute to pull the plastic bag out of there. We always keep extra plastic bags in the bottom of the can underneath the full one. Just throw it out there and stuff. And the blue recycling bin that's out at the fixed wing field and the helicopter field are exclusively for bottles and cans. And one of our members likes to take those down to the recycling place and make a few bucks on it. And that's just fine, to do that kind of a thing. All right, our friend, the jungle out there. My opinion, everybody's got one and I've got one. You crash a plane out in the jungle, leave it. That's my opinion on the thing. You get out there and get tangled up out in the poison ivy, or you get bit by a snake. Is it really worth retrieving $100 airplane, from the jungle out there? And my belief is, if you lose it out there, let it go. The club takes no responsibility. And this is my warning, is we do not recommend that you go out to the jungle to collect and retrieve an airplane. If you go out there, it's all on your own. You've actually signed an agreement to become a club member that says you're aware that the jungle is dangerous and you should not go out there. If you choose to go out there, you're on your own, and do it. But boy, I tell you what, I'd think twice or three times. If you do go out, you make sure you bring somebody with you, because if you go out there and twist an ankle, or you get tangled up in the vines, which is easy to do out there, you need to make sure you got somebody with you. And each of you should either have a cell phone or a handy talkie radio or something like that to be able to maintain contact, with your buddy, or back to the field where somebody is kind of keeping an open ear for you if you get into trouble. And everybody that I know that's gone out to the jungle has gotten a case of poison ivy. And a few people have had approached by snakes. And, the question is it really worth it? Okay.
I'll attest right there, that poison ivy. As you look at your picture there, and you can see that on that back side of the hill, there is a buttload of it out there. I went out about 3 weeks ago. I still have it on my legs.
Yeah.
So it's bad. Just be aware.
I've seen guys put on the Tyvek suits or rainwear and stuff out there. The problem is when you go to take that stuff off, the oils that are left from the poison ivy rub right off on your hands or any place that you set down that Tyvek suit or the rain suit that you've got. It just causes a bigger problem. So enough of my harangue on this. Stay out of the jungle. It's not worth it. So some things that I think most people are aware of are some of the events that we've got. We do have the monthly meetings. If you haven't been to one before, it had been on the third Thursday of every month at the Senior Center in San Marcos, but since COVID came up, we canceled that. And fortunately, because of the easing of the COVID restrictions and so forth, Chris has done a good job having the club meetings at the field on Saturdays. And I think everybody really likes that. So, that's something that probably would continue for a while. And all the other things you can read about them there. There's all kinds of things that we have for extracurricular, I guess you could say, activities. And if you've got something you'd like to propose in terms of a new event or a new activity, please do so to any of the board members that are out there and put it to consideration and organize it and put it on so that we have some fun. Okay. So bottom line on this thing for this whole business is the safety of the field is everybody's responsibility. It's not the board members, the president, the safety officer, whatever out there. It's everybody's thing. If you see a problem, you address it. If you're concerned about the way somebody's flying, bring it up to the pilot that's causing the trouble out there. And most of the time, the guys will take it in good spirits as long as you address it that way. If somebody turns out to be belligerent and just doesn't want to listen to what you have to say, then see a club officer or a board member and we'll take care of it, type of a thing. Any other comments on that? Okay. So last thing, for this club to run effectively, it takes volunteers. It takes the people that have a passion for this hobby and are willing to give back for something that's been given to them. We have a wonderful gift in Johnson Field. It costs us nothing, not one penny to have use of that field. It's just the generosity of the Pappas family who have been doing this for more than 20 years for us out there. And a lot of you have had flight training through the club at no cost and things like that. I know that I can share a story about my friend Avellino over there. I know that he tried to get me to join the club, 7-8 years ago now, Chris, something like that. And I was reluctant to come out because I thought it would be a little too structured for me, kind of a thing out there. And before you knew it, Chris joined the club. And I think he went in as secretary, didn't he?
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
so.
first year. I mean, that's what he did. And, look at Don Davis. Don Davis says, geez, I just learned how to fly myself. And now I'm chief flight instructor. And tell me that hasn't been a good experience for you.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity, Steve.
All right. And all of the guys that serve on the board of directors or in the different officer roles out there, it does more for you than you can ever do for the club. But if you're not sure what to do, there's a million jobs that need to be done. Just helping with a cleanup a little bit. You look what Hal's done out there in terms of just taking ownership. This is his club now, man. I'm telling you, going out there and making sure that the field is in perfect condition all the time with the mowing and all the little features he's put out into the pits and all that stuff. God, thank you for that. If you're not sure you want to get on the board, there's other things that you can do. You can write some articles for Joe Bucco in the Transmitter. Everybody that has a cell phone's got a camera, and go out there and take some pictures and send them over to Richard Torres for publication on the site or for the Transmitter out there. Joe Villarreal has been a big cook for us for years, and there's another guys like Roger Cosio and some of the other guys that help out. Just pitch in, and see what happens, and you'll have a ball. And if you're new to the club, it's a great way to meet the other members and have them meet you, as much as anything out there. So don't be afraid to do some volunteering. All right. So basically that's the blah, blah, blah today. And this wonderful opportunity that we have for Johnson Field and all the great things that this hobby brings to the party. And it doesn't take much to do things the right way. And I hope that, you all have had a chance to enjoy the experiences out there and stuff like that. So on that note, I'm going to just throw it open to questions or concerns, and we'll wrap it up other than that.
Steve, this is Tim. Could you just confirm that the field will be open for flying tomorrow? I know Monday was rainy. I didn't know if that delayed the runway?
Unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that.
Okay,
Anybody know? Because it was supposed to be closed Monday through Wednesday, as I
Right.
recall.
I was out there this morning.
How was it?
This is how I was out there this morning and talked. I was out there yesterday and Monday. They put the coating on yesterday, and he told me they were coming out today to stripe it.
Okay.
And I asked him if the coating was going to be soft or anything like that, and he said no. He says it'll be nice and dry, and we can use it on Thursday.
okay.
Doug Abel, can I throw this out to you here for a second, or Chris? Would you drop a note to Thompson to ask to have an email blast to come out so there's no question about that? Just so that he can send out a blast to let all the members know when the field is actually legitimate to reopen. Okay. I think Chris is back in town again, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else we should cover?
I'm sending him a text right now.
Any other questions or problems?
Hey, if I can just say one quick thing too. First, Gab, thank you.
You're welcome.
Obviously for doing this. Awesome. Thank you for putting the slides together. It's pretty darn amazing. The only thing I would offer too is if you haven't been a spotter before, by all means, jump in on the line and be a spotter. What a spotter is if the line's got 3 or 4 people on the line, you stand behind the pilot who's flying and you're not flying and you're just spotting for that pilot. It's a good safety way, but it's also a great way to learn situational awareness because you're not actually watching your pilot, you're watching the other person's plane or planes. That way you make sure that there's not an incursion. You can help that. It's like being a caddy to a pilot. Sometimes people get ego about the fact that I don't need a spotter, but I think once, I don't know, Jim, Christy, you were either spotting for me or I was spotting for you, or maybe it was both, but I remember Christy was spotting, I think it was for me. And anytime I wanted to come down, Jim was helping call out if planes were getting ready to come down the runway or whatever. And, you know, it's just a great way to fly safely. And again, if you're spotting, it helps you learn the field and planes and trying to predictability and things like that. So if you're ever out there, I am happy to spot for you. And if I'm flying, by all means, please come spot for me. And I can even teach you how to do it if you're kind of a little uncomfortable about doing it. But it's a great way to get engaged and learn without even flying. So for lack of better words.
Going hand in hand with that, Chris, because there are guys out there. I happen to be one of them who is FPV pilots. There is a club AMA and FAA requirement that if you guys are flying anything with first person view where you're flying under a headset, you are required to have a spotter for that. So if anybody comes up and asks you, hey, what'd you spot for me? Same sort of thing. All you have to do is just watch out for them, for where they're flying and seeing the planes that are coming around, or if you're flying a quad like I do. It's really simple. It's not hard to do. It's just basically saying, hey, you got somebody coming in from the left or from the right, or, you know, we got a car coming in, pay attention to that. Or even more importantly, if you're flying the quads and you start getting crazy, hey, your quad went down, you know, 12 o'clock, about 100 yards out. Okay. It's really a basic thing, and it's very helpful for all of us who are flying. We do appreciate it, really.
Yep. To go hand in hand with that, you know, if you see somebody that's in trouble, you think that they're going to crash somewhere, just have an extra set of eyes to triangulate the position where the plane went down on the field and say you're about 200 yards out at 11 o'clock, you know, is a great way to let them know where their plane is and stuff. All right. Anything else, guys? All right. Everybody have a good night. We'll see you at the field this weekend. Huh?
Before you go, just one thing. Hi, this is Phil to everybody. I have a bunch of apparel to take to the field on Saturday for the meeting. So it's t-shirts, sweatshirts, and jackets. So all I'm going to do is advise you to either bring your checkbook or bring, you know, tens and singles, because I'm not going to be able to really make change for you. But I've got 2 boxes that I'll be laying out on one of the tables.
Sounds good. All right. That's it. Everybody have a pleasant evening, and hopefully we'll see you in about 2 weeks when we do the transmitter receiver setups. Okay.
Cool.
Thanks,
Thanks, Steve.